Hello, my name's Gordon Port, and I'm one of the volunteers with the Natural History Society, and I'm also coordinator of the invertebrate section of the Society. That means that I get to plan events and activities, including the talks that we run through the winter months. And a couple of years ago, I had a withered idea that it would be really good to get Erica McAlister to come and talk to the Society about her specialist topic, which is flies. Now, Erica is a senior curator at the Natural History Museum in London, where she's involved with the flies and also with the fleas. But tonight's talk is going to be about her passion, which is flies. Erica's a very good communicator of science. She's involved in many radio programs, she's been on television, and she's also written 2 books. The first book was called The Secret Life of Flies, and the second, which has been published recently, is The Inside Out of Flies. And that is the subject of her talk tonight. So over to you, Erica.
Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Erica McAlister. You're my first recording of my PowerPoint presentation. I am going to talk to you today about flies. First of all, I will tell you a little bit about my work. So I work at the Natural History Museum in London, and everybody knows the Natural History Museum in London. It's a very famous place. But arguably, when people think about the Natural History Museum, they think about bones or stones, the big dinosaurs, the meteorites, everything is huge and impressive. But what most people don't realise is behind the scenes there are 80 million specimens, of which there are several million of the most amazing organisms, the flies. Now, I've been working on this collection for over 15 years, but I'm not unusual or alone in my little love of flies. In fact, we have been looking at flies for hundreds of years. We can go back to really lovely, beautiful early examples of where we've been studying them. So everybody at home should have a copy of Robert Hoote's Micrographia, because it is outstandingly beautiful. Being one of the first people to uptake the use of the new-fangled invention, the microscope, he was able to study lots of objects, common objects around him, in really high detail. And what could be better than the flies? So here on the left, we have a beautiful horsefly head, and this is a male, we can tell because the eyes are joined at the top. But you can see that even 300 years ago, he was beginning to understand the finer detail, such as the individual eye facets, the ommatidia, that make up the compound eyes of this fly. And we've been looking at them ever since. So here we go, we've got some of the new images that we're able to take with stacking systems set up to enable us to look at really high resolution images to properly understand what we're seeing, what the features are. This is arguably one of the closest you'll ever get to a massive fly's head, unless you're a specialist like me. But we can really see now the features that help us define what the species is and try to understand what they're doing. So first off, what is a fly? So this is the problem I have with many people, is that the term fly means many things. But if in my world, a true fly, a diptera, has to have certain features. Now, I'm going to say it has to have certain features because flies are arguably the most annoying creatures on the world, although they're the most lovely, because often they have taken that basic body plan and destroyed it. They are no longer working off the same blueprint as everything else. So, for example, what makes a fly an insect? It's got its head, thorax, abdomen, and 3 pairs of legs. Now, not all adult flies have legs, so that's again an amusing thing they've got rid of. But as an adult, to make them truly a fly, you must have the sectorial mouth parts at the front, 1 pair of wings as an adult. There's only other group of insects that only has 1 pair of wings, and they're strepsipsids. And these are tiny little twisted winged parasites that you may come across under the abdomens of, or stuck in the abdomen of bees. And they also have 1 pair of halters. These are the amazing balancing organs that enable flies to carry out some of the most stunning aerobatic feats. Now, I'm telling you that they must have those 3 features. I will tell you that loads of flies don't have wings. Loads of flies don't feed as adults, and some of them have even got rid of their halters. They are just basically little round blobs. And no, they're not called walks. But that is basically what a fly is. And what I love about them is their morphological variability. So in writing my latest book, The Inside Out of Flies, I wanted to kind of get to understand these more and start looking at them properly. But as we all know, it's not just the adults we've got to be concentrating on, it's the larvae. So here, this adorable little face is actually not a face. You're looking at the backside of a maggot. Yes, these are those eyes that are staring at you in a beautiful, whimsical, curious fashion are in fact its anal spiracles. It's what it breathes out of. So flies have this great diversification, this splitting within their life cycle that enables not only the larvae to live in different environments, but to feed off different feed. So you get a niche separation, which is allowed for this huge speciation to occur. And this is really important because it is such a useful ecological tool and also helps us survive on this planet. So, for example, the rat-tailed maggot. Many of you would have come across the rat-tailed maggot. It's adorable. Hangs around in sewage. Everyone hangs around near sewage. And what you can see here is it dangling from the surface, and that is enabled because of its really long anal spiracle. So this enables it to take in oxygen from the air whilst feeding in quite an anoxic environment. Brilliant. So this is the stage that gets rid of our waste, gets rid of all the things that we don't like in the environment. And then, after a quick period of pupation, where it nearly completely reorganizes its body tissues, the adult form emerges. And the example in this case of the adult is a beautiful hoverfly, Eristalis. So this is the rat-tailed maggots belong to, there's a lot of the Eristalines, these hoverflies that have these larvae. And these adults are arguably some of the most important pollinators in the UK. In fact, when we look at hoverflies full stop, they're absolutely brilliant because some of their larvae are eat decomposing material and others eat aphids. So this little adult pollinator, brilliant, goes round. Some of the pollinators will migrate across from Africa to turn up on our shores. Their larvae eat our pests, and the adults pollinate our crops. So this is a really important thing. These are a really important group. And look, it's covered in it. Now, what we previously, and one of the terms I really hate is bee mimics. Because are they really mimicking bees, or is it because they have exactly the same roles in ecology that they kind of look alike? Is this an example maybe of convergent evolution? Just throwing that out there. But we think of them very differently in terms of when we think about bee pollinators, because they do not have to go back to their hives. They do not have special baskets in which to collect the pollen. They do not share their pollen. In fact, they're rather individualistic, messy feeders, as this is a classic example of that. Some of them will be adapted with specific combs to enable them to brush the pollen forward for them to eat it. So they are exceptionally good pollinators. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk through a fly. I'm going to talk through the head, the thorax, and the abdomen and talk about certain features. and some of the funny modifications that have gone on. So the head, we know, is where all the sensory equipment is. So how it hears, how it sees, and how it smells, etc. And one of the most obvious features with many of the flies are their eyes. So this is a St. Mark's fly. It's quite amazing. So you've got two combined eyes. This is a male. He's basically all eyes because all the males are trying to do is find the ladies. So he has a lot of ommatidia and sometimes often larger, these individual eye facets for which he can see the ladies. Now, in insects, they generally, in each ommatidia, they have one photosynthesis cell that runs down, or what, an individual ommatidium, and it's fused of maybe 8 cells. Now, flies obviously don't like being the same as the rest of the insects, and this is no longer fused. So you see on the left-hand side of the screen, what we've got here is a slice through one of these individual eye facets, showing you where the little leaf-like things are. These are the photosensory cells, showing you how they differ as we go down the cell, the actual ommatidium. So it's able to not just pick one image per cell, it is able to pick, in this case, 7 images. So although they may not have the most number of eye facets in comparison to other insects, they have a greater acuity and they are able to see with much more sharpness. Hence why it's really difficult if you want to swat a fly, and you should never swat a fly because that is bad. But flies aren't just used for seeing. No, not with insects, not with the flies. They are used for flirting. And here we have a lovely example of stalk-eyed flies, and this has happened independently in flies over 20 times. The females must obviously love a stalk eye. And it's fascinating to know that during the pupal development is the optic nerve will grow and develop, but very, very coiled, highly sprung. And when the adult emerges, it immediately ingests a load of air and it pops out its eye stalks. Fascinating. We move on to the mouth parts. Mole flies have mouth parts. This rather adorable creature, of which actually I have a jar of larvae on my desk, as everyone does in their shed at home, is a botfly. It's a reindeer botfly, so very nice over Christmas. Now this little thing does not feed at all as an adult. It leaves it all to that really hungry larvae that's living in the nose of a reindeer to consume enough food for the entire life cycle. So at best it has a tiny vestigial mouth part which it will take a little bit of water. So true, they are unusual. In fact, we know many a mouth part very intimately, as we do with mosquitoes. Now, I know most people don't like mosquitoes, but you have to admit they're absolutely fascinating. And how they have developed has led to some amazing discoveries and an amazing bio-inspired products that we are beginning to start utilizing at the moment, such as the smart needle. So when that female, as you can see in the little diagram, she's inserted her stylet through your skin, it is not a solid, immovable object. In fact, she can manipulate underneath the skin because there's sensors at the very end of that mouth part which she can actually smell for capillaries, so she can sense where the blood is and she will find it, and she can move past objects underneath the skin that she doesn't want to penetrate. Now, that sounds quite grim, but what we're doing is using it to make bio-inspired needles. So this, if you imagine you're doing a highly invasive surgery, you've got some very delicate tissue you don't want to go through, we can now think about manipulating the needle past those bits of surgery to enable you to get to the actual bit that is the necessary part. And also, what is amazing about these is that most of the time when that little mosquito, here we go, I have a little prop for you, when that little mosquito is going and it starts feeding on your skin, you rarely notice it at that point. You only notice it when off she's gone and you're like, oh, start itching. Because if you look in the top left, she basically has a pneumatic drill which is gently vibrating, and by doing this she is able to penetrate the skin with a lot less pressure. Again, we are adding this to our smart needles. So the next time a mosquito feeds on you, say thank you. You're helping modern surgery. They haven't got the longest mouth parts. This is one of my favourites. This is Megasterinchus longirostris. Yep, it's quite a long name as well. And this is a nemastinid, a tangled vein fly. And if that fly was human, your tongue would be 6 meters long. So it is quite an amazing structure, and it's a guild pollinator. It's co-evolved alongside specific plants that would die out if this fly died out. But what I love is that unlike moths and butterflies, it can't curl up its tongue. Oh no. So when it's finished feeding, it has to basically flip its little mouth part underneath its body and fly along with it dangling out the back of it. Extraordinary. You haven't talked about flirting in at least 2 slides. So again, let's think about how they've modified the head structure for flirting. These are what we call moose flies. I think you can see why. And this is actually Achius. This is one of the amazing moose flies that have modified its cheeks to use to show off to its territory to other males when it defends its territory and flirt with the ladies. Final bit on the head that's of importance to us are the antennae. These are the ears of the fly. These they can hear over very long distances and in very small circumstances. A mosquito, when she's trying to find you, she will listen to you first. In fact, male mosquitoes use what we call the cocktail party effect when they're trying to find females. They can hear many noises around the room, as it were, but one mention of their name, your name in a party, Erica, I can hear that. What they can do is one little female fly will fly past in the other side of the room and they go, hold on a minute, that sounds like my future mate. And they can get rid of all other noise in the room and just hone in on her and figure out her velocity, her speed, and try and work out whether she's a suitable mate or not. So you've got these amazingly different structures of antennae. We've got the beautiful paddles of a spider-killing fly in the top left. Why it's like that, we don't know. We have a very bifurcated antennae here of a tachinid, a parasite fly, on the top right, and again, it's got a bowl on the front of its face to amplify all the noise that's coming through. But my favourite, obviously, back to flirting again, is these are winged net-winged flies. These are Blepharisteridae, and these are found in cold water streams. And this little male, because it is a male, he doesn't use his antennae just for hearing. He uses it as a spacer. So like, this is my territory. Back off, all you other males. Moving on to the thorax. This is where most of the modifications gone for movement are involved with. So the wings and the legs and things like that. But this one fly hasn't given up on using it as a sensory part. In fact, this is one of the parasitic flies. This is Ormia ochracea. And if you have a look, you can see the hole on the beginning of the thorax. That's a spiracle, that's where it breathes. And below that looks like what is an orange segment. Now this orange segment is actually its ears. So it's got shoulder pads that it can listen through. Because this is quite a small fly and it has a very specific target it wants to get at, which is quite active, they have to really listen out for the hosts for their larvae. So it's because it's so small, it's like us, it's not like it can easily work out and triangulate where the noise comes from because it's so small, it can't do it in the normal way. So it's developed basically hearing aids. It's developed a form of like, hearing aids, an eardrum on its shoulder pads, which basically amplifies any noise that comes their way. And so they're able to picture perfect, absolutely able, to figure out where the little host is, usually a grasshopper, for their larvae. Now, clever minds, not mine, obviously, as I've just demonstrated with my complete failure to use the English language, have actually thought, do you know what? We can actually use this for ourselves to develop very, very small hearing aids. So again, we've been inspired by the basic nature of flies. The legs. Legs aren't just for walking. Oh no, they're used for flirting as well. Don't we love it? In fact, many flies will produce balls made out of saliva or silk, which they give as nuptial gifts. And the family that does this better than anything else are the empids, the dance flies. And what's quite crazy is here we've got these silk glands in the first pair of their legs. Now this one species that's just got described, sometimes it has one, sometimes it has on one leg, sometimes it has on the other leg, sometimes it has on both legs, and sometimes it has on no legs. So we don't know yet is the evolutionary advantage of actually producing this silk in comparison to not. So although we have discovered loads of new things, there's still much more to learn. My favourite legs are the raptorial legs. So these are vicious predators. This is a brine fly. It's beautiful. She's amazing. And look at her front legs, how they've got the spines on them. So she's quite good at what she does. And you've got to like her because she likes nothing better than fishing for mosquito larvae, as she wraps them round their little necks and squeezes the life out of them as she feeds on them. What a great woman. Wings. Flies are known for wings. Not all flies have wings, remember that. But this is an example of some beautifully big wings. And of course it's a male. Anytime there's exaggerated characters, oh look, it's the male. Now this is the New Zealand cannibal fly. Not a cannibal, but it is found in New Zealand. In fact, this is a close relative of the housefly. It's got massive wings, it's amazing. And insect flying is something they're very, very known for within the flies, especially with these lot, the hoverflies. Now this is an amazing feat. Being able to roll, to yaw, to turn, to just suddenly go 90 degrees is truly extraordinary, and we're actually looking at it for bio-inspired flight mechanisms such as nanobots. I was lucky enough to be visited by Professor Crap, terrible name, brilliant research, who's actually looking at flight vision, flight, and how they are able to maneuver quickly for the development of actual flight within our planes, and how supercomputers can process information faster to enable them to produce such maneuvers. We are making tiny little robots, nanobots, that are able now to go into regions that we can't go, maybe a collapsed building or a chemical leak, those sort of things, based on many of the flight patterns of the hoverflies. And what I like is now there's many little Mars bots, i.e., yep, they're sending bots based on hoverfly flight to Mars to start roaming around the surface to tell us something more. Ooh. So across the whole of the body, we have bristles. And bristles are quite fun because they're really difficult. So when I mean fun, I mean they're not fun at all. But they're very, very useful for taxonomy. We will spend countless hours counting down the sides of the back and the thorax and on the legs and in the head about these bristle arrangements because they help us determine when one species is different from another. What all of these bristles do, we do not know. Okay, we are beginning to understand that some of them at their pits will have different mechanical receptors, chemoreceptors, all sorts of things. But how they all work and how they all interact, this is still very new and very unexplored in us. But what we are finding out is some quite funky things. So not only do they have bristles all over them, every insect skeleton is covered in hydrocarbons. These hydrocarbons are specific to that animal and specific to that age of animal. They change over time. And different insects, different flies, for example, will smell them and take cues from them. They can tell if a female is ready to mate. They can tell all sorts of things. But they've also been used in a rather funky fashion. Here is a lovely example of how this has happened in combination of bristles and hydrocarbons. So this is a scuba diving fly. This is a Phaedra hyans, and we commonly call this in the family of brine flies. And this little lady is amazing. And in fact, I might even use the word awesome, and I really don't use that word because I don't like it. But I have been awe-inspired by this fly because she is able to scuba dive in the mono lakes of California. And if any of you know anything about them, you'll know that they're probably the most saline environments out. These lakes are at the base of several mountains, and when there's a runoff, there's nowhere for them to run out. That's my cat, sorry. And what happens then is that as the waters evaporate, they become more and more concentrated. They are so salty. In fact, so salty that very few creatures are able to live there. Now, we get lots of scuba diving insects. We got a lot in the UK. Everyone knows them. And what normally happens is, again, the hydrocarbons in the bristles will enable this plastron, this bubble, to form over the creature to enable it to go down till it uses up all the oxygen in the bubble, and then it returns to the surface, fills it up again. This can't happen in a really saline environment because the salinity completely disrupts the chemistry of the organism, and therefore the plastron won't fit. These guys, or ladies rather, have actually managed to do it in such a way that this doesn't happen. What is amazing, physicists have been studying this, and they are able to see that she has to penetrate the water at an exact angle to enable the plastron to form, and then she goes down with force, and she's generating force caused by her going through this dense medium, and then when she lets go at the bottom, poof, out she flies. What I love about this creature, not only everything else, but if you look carefully, her eyes are not covered by the plastron. So how it enables her to see, but how she's able to do this, I have no idea. We move on to the abdomen. The abdomen is arguably the less morphologically showy part, unless we're talking about the terminalia, but I leave the best to last. Generally, most of it is quite simple on the outside, but what goes on the inside is quite fun. And a good example of this is with this group of flies in the chironomids, the chiroplatids, and this is where they have bioluminescence. Now they have a unique bioluminescence. It's not the same enzymes that you will find in other creatures, obviously. And what they are able to do is do this in their kidneys, their Malpighian tubules. And what they do is they produce this little lure. Now, these are highly vicious predators, if you could call the midge larvae of a chiroplatid a highly vicious predator. They dangle down these little balls, and these are basically death balls because they contain an enzyme that dissolves the insect that gets stuck on it, which are lured by these beautiful lights shimmering and sparkling, and their little insect, the little moths are like, oh, pretty light, death. And then the little midge will pull up its little prey, it's fish for in the air of a cave, and will start feasting on it. What's quite fun is if you have a look at any of the videos, if any of them get too close to each other, they will start fighting as well. I mean, they properly are hardcore predators. But any of you know me, or any of you know anyone who works with flies, we always end up on genitalia. And this is because most of the time we're trying to do identifications. And when we're doing identifications, one of the features that adapts quickest is going to be the genitalia. So this is the fastest changing part of any animal when it speciates. Most of the time, we will talk about male genitalia. It's always the way, and it gets quite frustrating when you're in a room full of dipters going on about how annoying, how dull female genitalia is. However, this lovely group of flies, this is the family called Chironomidae, or wasp grabbers or bee grabbers. It is the female genitalia, which is quite extraordinary. Because basically, she has a tin opener that she will catch the host that she's going to insert her egg in, which is a bee or a wasp or whatever, and then she will slide through to insert her little egg. So it's amazing. We can actually split them and identify them based on these really nasty body morphications. But, of course, we have to talk about the males because male fly appendages are extraordinary. So what we have here is a lovely example. Again, these are in the Empidae, and this is basically you're looking at 4 curly whirly penises. There's no kidding around it. They look extraordinary because even though they will consider the female genitalia quite dull because most of the time it's hidden, there's actually a lot going on inside when it comes to sperm competition and the male-female conflict. As we all know, the sexes are at war, and it is highly exemplified in the flies when they've had to evolve these very, very, very long penises. But it's not just them that are exceptionally long. Arguably, some of the longest sperm to body ratio is found in this species. Now, Drosophila are the model organisms. We've been studying them for years. We keep them in labs because they're cheap, they are easy to maintain, and they like having sex. Lots of it, which enables us to quickly study rapid changes in evolution, understanding their genes, inheritance, and all of these sorts of features. But all of the Drosophila have what we call megasperm, big sperm. Now, Drosophila melanogaster, the common organism that we play around with, it has sperm 1 millimetre long. That's not big, you say? Well, the organism itself is only 3 millimetres, so I beg to differ, and it's still about 1,000 times bigger than human sperm. For this one, this little relative, it's not happy on a 1 millimetre sperm. No, it has sperm that is 5.8 centimetres long. Whoa. In fact, the equivalent would basically a human male having a sperm the size of a blue whale. Just saying, it's massive. I mean, they don't have many. They only have up to 100 in their lifestyle. And I think with this species here, they have about 10 on average. So they're very careful. But they need them that long to compete inside the female with the other sperm. So you've got all these modifications from the head, from the thorax to the abdomen to produce some wonderful creatures. They are the fourth species-rich group of animals on the planet, but that's only the described ones. When we get round to the rest of it, we know that they're probably going to be first or second when it comes to the insects. So there's a lot of them. So I just finished with this little one because it's quite a fun example of how modifications have gone a bit mad. So this is a Pontomaya, this is a chironomid. Now this is found in the sea. We don't think about marine insects, but there are quite a lot of flies that are marine. And this is one of about 4 or 5 species in this genera, which is completely modified the adult form for the environment. So we've got a massively elongated first pair of legs and a massive elongated antennae. And in fact, what they do is they use both of these for rowing around the surface and sensing where the females are. He's also, instead of using his wings to fly, he uses them as paddles. So he's able to propel himself across the surface of the sea. And this is extraordinary because this little male has about 2.5 adults to live, 2.5 hours to live as an adult. That's quite funny. So you consider the female. She won't even bother with that. It takes just half an hour for her to be in her adult form before she dies. And she doesn't even bother really to change into something that looks significantly like a fly. In fact, she just basically sticks her genitalia through the surface of the sea, and that is what he is rowing around to try and find. This is an extraordinary way of living your life. So these and many other flies are really some of the greatest aeronautical engineers, some of the most amazingly important ecosystem functioners out. And this book is a brief little dip of our tarsi, as it were, into their insides and outsides. Thank you very much. You can follow me on Twitter, on Flygale NHM. Otherwise, everyone please buy the book. Thank you.
Wow, that was a real tour de force, Erica. Thank you very much indeed for that splendid talk. And the images you've got. There are things there about flies I didn't know, and then some of them I wish I hadn't heard. But a really, really informative talk, and thank you ever so much. Certainly, I'm going to be putting your book on my Christmas list this year. So once again, thank you very much, Erica, and thank you everybody for listening.